All right. So thanks, everyone. Asparagus on the grill. I hear that. Awesome. Ice cream. I don't know what an April spritz is, but I'm going to have to look that up, Julia.
Look it up for sure. That was a great suggestion.
Yeah. Awesome. Cherry blossom infused things. I love it. Awesome. All right. So I know that in our kickoff meeting, I want to apologize. I didn't give folks a lot of time to interact with one another. And so as a point of feedback, wanted to share, wanted to ask kind of a little bit of groupthink. Did folks, have any of you had initial success in getting press or community attention out about your grants? Or what questions or comments might you have about the media kit that was provided earlier this month? So feel free to take yourselves off mute if you have any comments or questions, or want to share out some early successes that you're already having in your neck of the woods.
At my school, we talked to organizational advancement. They handle the social media for the Perkins School, and they thought it best to wait a little bit until we are actually seeing students working in the garden, or we have the raised elevated beds at school, or the flex farm is set up in the cafeteria. So they suggested waiting until we can have some photos that students are participating, and then send out a big blast through social media and through the rest of RFK.
Yeah, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for sharing that, Danielle. Anyone else, or other folks in the same boat? You're just waiting for good content to be able to post out about. I see Caitlin nodding. John?
Yeah, we're in the same boat more or less, but it's interesting. We've already finished our project, which was a giant teacher training. And so, but one of the things we wanted to do was to get into the hands of each of the teachers a board book that they could read in their classroom. So of course, last week they were out of school. So this week, then they're coming back, we're going to, go in and take some pictures of them reading the book to the classes and such, and add that into the content that we're going to be sending out. So,
oh, that's awesome. And John, don't forget about us and Desi and any of your state legislators to tag them in too, because it's thanks to the legislative allocation that this grant was made possible.
Yeah, no, it's always part of any state grant. I make sure I turn it around right to the reps and senators and let them know.
Great, thanks so much. I'm so glad to hear your teacher training's already gone off without a hitch. That's awesome. All right. Any other so it looks like Northampton is starting to meet with the team that will be developing the program to plan together. And so sounds like, Brian, you're in the same boat, waiting for some good content to then post about. Awesome. And forgive me, I need to admit a few folks into the waiting room. All right, great. Welcome, folks. We're just getting through our very beginning icebreaker and our group discussion. If folks had initial success getting press out about your event or about your grant, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you don't mind, your name, your district, and location, and what your iconic taste of spring is. And we'll go from there. All right. So we wanted today's training is really to talk about procurement threshold. It's to talk about procurement. So not everyone's in John's boat. Like some of you are still working on spending down your grant. So what are the procurement thresholds? How can you select vendors? What is the ed grant process to claim for reimbursement? What are the expectations for record keeping? A little bit on events and storytelling and the preview to your grant reporting, and upcoming training and resources. So that's the agenda for what we're going to be going through with all of you today. Thanks for joining, Sharon. Glad you can be with us. So for procurement, so there's a range of awards on the call today. Basically, for for goods and services procurement, many of you have to make sure that you're tracking who you're gonna get your goods and services from. It's considered a micro purchase if you're retaining any goods or services that are under $10,000. That money can be directly spent with a vendor, but please note that the 10,000 is aggregate spending. So if your organization or if your school district uses a vendor in another department, that total spending for the fiscal year can't exceed $10,000 without going out for a 3-quote bid. As far as for small purchasing, any good or service for 10,000 to 100,000, which all of your programs, nobody had over $100,000 in this grant. You have to request 3 quotes for the goods or services in a written scope. And then you have to send that out to at least 3 vendors, and you have to award the lowest bid that fits the scope. The best practice that I've used is certainly email all 3 vendors on the same email, save that email as the proof that you solicited the request, and then also save the corresponding quotes that might come in. Just because you send out a request for quote does not mean that vendors are going to respond to you in a timely fashion. That is okay. It is your obligation to request 3 quotes, and by the determination time of like, we need this quote by fill in the blank date. If vendors haven't gotten back to you, you go with the vendor that met your specs, and you can go from there. Any questions here? Danielle?
I have a question. What if there are specialized vendors such as Fork Farms? Is that something I would need to triple bid?
Are you gonna spend, well, I will take a note about that because I think you also listed it in your grant application.
I did. So if there is a specific vendor listed, then you don't have to go back and triple bid. Like, for example, the elevated beds that are in the project. I have a vendor picked. I met with them last week. Would I have to triple bid that?
So again, it's based on the dollar threshold. So if it's under or over 10K, yep. And I will double check and follow up with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
Abby, question. We are building the beds ourselves and we're just buying the materials to build them. I know we spend a lot at Home Depot, but I didn't think that you would need to go out to bid for materials.
Yeah, so for materials, I used to be in a very similar spot working for a school district, and also if a vendor is on the state contract, you don't have to do the 3-quote. So I have also used a very big box store that's on the state contract for the nuts and bolts, if you will, to construct raised beds. Yep. So when you're selecting vendors, the key considerations are, is the amount over or under 10K? Are you using an existing vendor for your district or organization or not? Because that can also, should you check in with facilities to make sure you're not going over that 10K for services that they contract for? Is the vendor on the state contract? If they're on the state contract, you don't have to go out to quote. And then just making sure that what are the products that you're looking to source, and sending it out to vendors that can actually deliver that kind of product. Daniela, to your question, Fork Farms is not the only kind of farm that does educational programming with schools. However, you had identified that in your grant, and there are certain relationships and certain schedules that need to be adhered to, and that can be stipulated in your grant as well. And then making sure that delivery schedules and logistics will actually meet your needs for your project, especially many of you are trying to get some of your funds spent down by the end of June 30. You need goods and services delivered by June 30. If the kitchen, vendor for your oven isn't going to deliver their product until August of 2023, but you have another vendor that can deliver, in May, that would make it a more competitive quote. Sound good? All right, Denise, it's up to you. How to claim for reimbursement.
So I feel like this is like a hot, everyone's interested in hearing about this. So everyone is gonna claim for reimbursement or request funds that you anticipate spending in the next 30 days through Ed Grants. So if you have the Ed Grants account, you can log into your Ed Grants account, right? And go and submit the claim. If someone else in your organization has the Ed Grants account, then you would need to work with that person in order to submit this claim for reimbursement. The key, Abby's gonna be attaching a document that walks you through step by step, everything that you need to do in order to submit the claims for reimbursement. But I kind of put the highlights, or Abby put the highlights in this slide. You can only request reimbursement between the 20th of the month and the end of the month. So right now, because we're still getting all the ducks in a row with Ed Grants, I would focus your mind, and John, you're a perfect test case for this, on May, right? May 20th, 21st, however the calendar works out, log into Ed Grants and you can submit your either your request for reimbursement. So John, I can't remember your award off the top of my head. Let's say it was you've spent 10,000 over the past few months. You've got all your records in your receipts of what you've spent it on for the grant. Those are going to be retained in your office, right? As records of what you've spent. You would just total all that up and you enter that as your request for reimbursement. In Ed Grants, it's going to show you, right, how much money you have. It's going to allow you to submit how much money you've already spent. And let's say you know that you want to spend 5,000 next month on equipment, or how Molly was talking about the fact that she's going to go to Home Depot. You can then put that under anticipated over the next 30 days. You can see some of the screenshots here. It's going to total it up for you as the total number of funds requested. And when you submit that, that's the money that's going to be transferred into your organization's bank account. Now, if you plan to spend money 4 months from now, right, you can't put it in anticipated expenditures. It's really what you've already spent or what you plan to spend in the next 30 days. If you have questions, you get tricked up with this process itself, I've listed here Ed Grants' email and phone number. Or if you don't hear from them or you feel more comfortable calling me, then you can contact me. I'm just going to call them because they're really the experts on it. But that is how you're going to make claims for reimbursement. So I want to just pause there for 1 second. Take a look at the documentation that Abby sends you. And if at that point you have more questions, we can totally talk. And then I did put a tickler in here about, we're going to talk about the process to request your funds for 24 on June 1st. So there will be that. It's going to be a very easy process. We'll talk about it in June.
Great. Thanks, Denise. Any other questions about Ed Grants? I know some of you are seasoned at doing Ed Grant stuff, others not. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
When you mentioned anticipated expenditures and you mentioned it would be put into the school's bank account. So is that literal or a figurative? Like I would reach out to the business office and kind of include them in my actions and say I requested $100 or 10,000 or whatever. Keep an eye out for it to be deposited into the Perkins account, something like that. Is that typically?
I think every internal relationship financially is different. Okay. I would meet with your business office and say, what do you need, right? Do you want me to give you copies of my receipts? Do you want me to keep them? Do you want me to let you know if I'm requesting money for anticipated costs? I would have a dialogue with them because every relationship between programs and business offices is going to be different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both. All right, so events and storytelling. Help us share your story. You know, when you do have photos or things that are happening, let us know. Denise and I are working on trying to get national attention on your projects, especially with USDA. And in order to do so, we need your help. So share your photos, tag Desi and Mass Farm to School in your social media posts. Invite us to your events, especially some of you are having, you know, planting days or, you know, celebrations. Invite us, you know, we'll see if we can make it or have our, you know, Denise has a press, you know, at least someone from the press team out. And then also your state legislators, they love coming to these kinds of things. This funding opportunity would not have been possible without them. And it's good for everybody. All right. So forecasting on grant reports. The grant reports are due at the end of the fiscal year. So we'll have the grant report open for you as soon as June 15th, and it needs to be completed by July 15th. We know that programs that have projects spanning 2 fiscal years, you know, consider this your midway grant report. We're going to ask each program to share 2 to 5 photos with accompanying photo release forms. And, you know, your district program release form is accepted. If you don't have one, I will be sending out USDA's photo release form as well. We'd love to hear quotes from participants, especially students. What was the impact for them in participating in your project? And then the summary of activities and the impact. So include the challenges or the deviations from your proposal in your final summary. We're really looking for qualitative, not quantitative data here. So we want some rich stories. Paint us a picture. And if there are any products, programs, or services that you would like to recommend to future grantees, we see this as a really great opportunity to share. Oh, you know, like certain educational farms that are in certain regions that are looking to expand with other school programs, or if there are curriculum resources that are really great for, you know, that pre-K set that John's working with at the YMCA. That those are kinds of resources that we can share with future grantees, as well as, you know, some of the nuts and bolts specs of, yeah, we found the 4x6 raised bed really worked a lot better than the 5x5 raised bed for our pre-K kids, because they just, you know, the 5x5s, they just couldn't reach that far in. Depending on whatever your project is, we'd really love to hear successes and challenges from this very short grant cycle, but hopefully for many of you, it'll just be a progress report. Oh, and just as far as forecasting, we will be going over, you know, what the questions are and that form submission in June at a future training. So just as a summary and follow-up, the resources that I'll send out after this call will be the Ed Grant step-by-step instructions that Denise mentioned. It's literally going to be a page-by-page screenshot of when you do this and click here, and then do this and click here, like fill in this section. So for some of you, it's you already know what you're doing. And for others, it really is a step-by-step instruction. I'll also send out a media release form should you need that. As an FYI, we are hosting office hours on May 3rd. If any of you have questions specifically about your grant, you know, pop in, happy to talk to you about it. In the meantime, like absolutely email me if you have questions. Denise is available, especially for the Ed Grants conversations. We will have a training on June 1st at 2 p.m. going over the fiscal year end. So with the deadline of June 30, we all know how crazy schools are basically from now on. But just reviewing any of the deadlines for claims and reimbursement and the grant reporting. We will also have a closeout session on June 15th at 2 p.m. to provide any support for outstanding questions for many of you. If you've already submitted your grant, you know, if you're in the process of submitting your grant report and you feel like, nope, I got it, I'm all set, it's optional. And then just as a reminder, that's my contact information if you want to get in touch. All right. And just as a reminder for the farm to school resources, so we have the local food map for any of you who are looking to fill in the holes for any of your farm to school harvest of the month items on your lunch menus. We do have the Farm to School Institute that is still accepting applications. If any of you want to sneak an application in at the deadline, it's really designed to help support schools, educational programs, or districts. And you all are here because you're committed to farm to school work happening for your students. The Farm to School Institute is really designed to help build a team to make sure that it's not just you making these things happen in your school or program. Just as a reminder, it's harvest the month. April's potatoes. Next month is May seafood. So if you're doing fun harvest of the month programming, feel free to tag us. We'd love to hear about it. And then for those of you who don't, sign up for our newsletter. And then outstanding questions. Awesome.
I have a question. I apologize if this was addressed somewhere already. When after payments are submitted through Ed Grants, will they be, which account are they deposited into? For example, with Fitchburg Schools here, we set it up through our school lunch program accounts. Would it go just right into that revolving account, or will we have to do sort of additional transfers?
So that is a fantastic question for your business office, because everybody may have different mixes of how this plays out. Something that's unique about this grant opportunity, right, is it's sort of being administered by this group that is focused on food service, but we are so happy to have a broad set of applicants. So I would go back to your business office and say, hey, like, where is this money going to? And ask that question.
Thank you.
And David, it also might be, hey, heads up, I'm submitting for this amount. If you see a miscellaneous deposit that's this specific dollar amount, that's for me. I've heard that be the case as well.
Thank you very much.
Great question. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, I'm happy to stay on if folks have other questions. We want to make it as easy as possible. I'll send out the summary, step-by-step of Ed Grants. This is being recorded. So for any of your program collaborators who missed the training today, please share the resources with them if they need to know how to submit the Ed Grants claim.